In this lesson, we're going to cover the 5 F's. And basically what they are is about coping strategies or coping mechanisms. So if we think of ourselves, like how do we cope? So if we're under some sort of stress or duress or we're feeling upset about something, some people eat, some people won't eat. Some people just sleep a lot, some people can't sleep at all, and some people just shut down. No one's the same, and no one has the same stress threshold. So for what is the maximum stress for me might be really different for you or for someone else. So each person displays it differently. Each person copes differently. Our animals are really the same. Now we talk about these 5 F's, and really what are they? We have flight, fight, freeze, fool around or fidget, and faint. And it's interesting because the fool around and faint are kind of misunderstood quite often with people. So we'll just go through each one of them. Now we know that flight is what most animals will do when they're under stress. That's their choice. It would not be in the best interest in the survival of the species if people fought every time there was some sort of an altercation or some sort of a disagreement. Humans probably do it more than most other species. Now, if they can't get out of the situation, then they may fight. So you have an animal feeling that they're cornered and there's nothing else that they can do. And that confrontation will trigger a fight response. Freeze, there's various levels of freeze, and freeze is a biological response that animals will have before they're eaten. That's that hard freeze when a rabbit is caught or an antelope is taken down by a lion. You see this freeze happen. Now, freeze can be a precursor to fight or flight. And I actually have seen video of even antelope where they'll freeze first and then boom, they'll be gone. And this can certainly happen in our animal situations for sure. Generally, when you see freeze, there'll be some change in the breathing. It looks like they're holding their breath or breathing shallowly. Often they're staring, the eyes get quite hard, and the mouth be really still. So they're a little bit like a statue. And in some animals, people mistakenly call this stubborn. And certainly that can be a big mistake in horses because it's often before this explosion happens. And certainly in dogs, this idea that, oh, he's just stubborn about something, it might be that just, they're not animals that are going to fight or fly, or they're not going to leave, they can't. But what they do is they just get really still. Fidget or fool around is extremely common in domesticated animals, and again, often misunderstood. You might have animals that are pawing at you or grabbing the leash or scratching or mouthing, and people look like they're really happy or playful, and it might be labeled as being attention seeking, or that they're bored, or that they're just really, really happy. So what you might see is the dog that you go to touch them in a certain place, for instance, and they suddenly get really excited and they start to roll around on their back and so on. So this may be a coping mechanism, especially if when you stop doing whatever you're doing or you get away from this area that you were working in, that suddenly the behavior stops. So clearly it becomes really a clear language that we don't necessarily always pay attention to. So if someone says to me, oh, my animal gets bored when I do something, or he's really happy, or he gets really overly excited, I just slow it down a little bit and see what happens. That if you're seeing a behavior that you see as being bored and you suddenly stop that, whatever you're doing, and they're now suddenly not bored anymore, it's probably that they're trying to tell you something. You may see fidget or fool around in I think in films, I've seen it in packs of wolves and so on, in a family dynamic where they're kind of interacting with each other, and it's almost like that kind of play fighting, but it's not serious. So I think it does happen there. So I don't think it's just that it's just sort of limited to our domesticated, particularly what I see it is in dogs and in horses. Faint, when things just become too much, and the place where I've seen it mostly in horses is where it's been loading in a trailer and they've been really, really pressured and they just lie down and give up. And they're not in freeze, they're animals conscious. It's just like, it's kind of like if you just say kind of uncle. And it is definitely a coping mechanism that probably falls somewhere in the range of well, fight or flight, you could say. When they can't do anything else, they literally just give up. But they're not frozen. And it's an interesting concept. And maybe sometimes when animals just lie down and say, that's enough, I can't do this anymore, but they're not aggressive about it. It could be that. So you don't see it so often, or maybe we don't recognize it so often. So these are all coping strategies. You can consider that they may be on a scale where one is sort of almost kind of overlapping the other, but not quite. There could be small indicators to big ones. So meaning that you can see an animal that may be a little bit uncertain, and so you see the behavior start to escalate just a tiny bit, or it may get really big. And we tend to pay attention to the big things and not so much to the little ones. Now, Edie Jane Eaton, one of our instructors, did a great article on shedding some candlelight on resistance in horses, and it'll be in one of the files in the course, and it's worth a read, even if you just have to extrapolate some of the information to dogs. So feeling safe. And the number one need that has to be met in all of us is that we have to feel safe. Now, some animals show visible concern, so they might shake or they might vocalize, and it's really clear by their posture that they're showing concern. And others seem perfectly fine, and one definition of fine is feelings inside not expressed. And those animals sometimes are labeled as dominant, and maybe not so much in today's world with animals, although there are all people that would still see that. And maybe we could say, well, they just don't feel safe giving up control. And the analogy that I use to people is, I ask groups of people, is how many of you prefer, if you're in the car, prefer to be the driver? And lots of people will put their hand up, and I will say, so is that because you're an alpha bitch? Haha, not really. It's probably because you feel safer when you're in control. And I think that that's the same with many of our animals. If we're not trustworthy, they don't feel they can trust us. And so that's where they have to feel safe enough to give up control to us, to know that we're going to be able to make decisions that are in their best interest and that will actually help them. So start noticing how your animals react in a novel or unfamiliar situations. It may be a certain amount of stress, because anything that's new or different will create a certain amount of stress in any of us. Anything that's different is not really comfortable. So just notice, do they have small responses? Do they have big responses? And then think about, how can you break down your request or the exercise into smaller pieces to reduce that anxiety and to make it easier, so that you take them, if you take them out of their comfort zone, that you then take them back into it, so that you don't leave them out until they go, help, I have to stop this. And that is really important in terms of gaining trust, and it will allow your animals to whisper to you instead of having to shout. So I think you'll find that if you pay attention to these kinds of information, that you'll actually learn a lot about your animals.